Hey everybody, welcome back. Dustin Schmidt here again. And today we're going to talk about a recent production that I just got back from last week and a little bit about cameras and some other things and why we make the choices that we do. So let's get into it. So I just wrapped a shoot this past week where I took out some of my Canon cinema cameras to execute and do the job. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I made those choices that I did versus maybe some other cameras that I have. So if you followed along with some of my other videos, you know that there's a couple different cameras that I work with here, depending on the job. One of them is the Canon C500 Mark II. One of them is the Red Komodo. And my other primary camera is the Canon R5C. I use all three of those cameras for video jobs, depending on what the job entails. And like anything, there's a right tool for the right job. And recently I had an interesting shoot that came up, and I can talk a little bit about it, and maybe show you a few things, but it's not out yet, so I can't really show everything. But basically the premise of the job is we were going to do a product shot that was going to be motion controlled. So we were going to use a new tool that I have that I'll get into a little bit, but probably won't talk about at length in any review process, that would allow us to have the camera move along a track focused on one item and then pan over and pull focus to another item. Very simple shot, short spot, 15-second spot that has a little bit of kind of a creative concept around it, but essentially it's just this simple camera move, right? And there's a lot of ways we could have done this. We could have just, done it on a simple dolly or slider and just kind of panned over and done this manually. But what I needed the move to be was repeatable and timed to a specific timing. So we really wanted to make sure we were hitting that 15-second time frame exact each time that we did it, because these spots are going to be on broadcast or digital, and we have to hit that time frame. And we also wanted to be in each focus area for a certain amount of time. So we couldn't just kind of like wing it and maybe the middle takes this long and the beginning we hold here for X number. Like, it needed to be repeatable. So I've got a couple tools that I knew were going to help me with that. One of them is a new product from eMotimo that I picked up recently, which is their, I think it's called the SA2 conductor. I'll put a little link or photo up here on screen. And essentially what it does is allows you to use your DJI RS gimbal as a sort of remote controlled head that this box that they have interfaces and controls. So they send you a controller, like a little game controller. And when you integrate it with a couple other things they sell, they have a little motor and a track for a Dana dolly, which is what I picked up. And then also you could integrate it with motors, like the tiltonucleus motors, if you wanted it to set when it pulls focus or zoom or iris or any of those three things. So, like I said, a simple move, but it could start to get a little bit complicated when you're trying to figure out how long you're staying at point A, how long the travel from point A to point B takes, how long we stay at point B, when do we pull focus, when do we tilt, when do we pan, all those types of things. Now, I own the RS3 Pro gimbal. It's got a pretty good payload capacity, and it will hold all three of the camera systems that I have. But there's varying levels of ease with which it does that. And so as I was testing cameras and going through the C500 Mark II, the Red Komodo, the R5C, to see which one would make the most sense for something like this, I ultimately settled on the R5C as my camera of choice for the gimbal and remote control camera move for a couple reasons. One, it's got very good picture, but mostly because of its size. It would be small enough that the gimbal would have no trouble flying it, doing any of these moves, moving at speed, all those types of things. It could easily support the weight. With the Komodo, one of the challenges was also very small, could support the weight, but did not have the autofocus capabilities of the R5C. So then you start to add on a lot of extra gack. You've got to add on a focus motor. You've got to program in that pull and that tracking for the camera, for the object tracking, because we're doing a pull back. We needed to focus on the subject all the way through the move back, and then when we panned over, focus on the other subject. And the R5C is a camera that does that very well. You can adjust the parameters on it in terms of focus speed, how quickly it changes focus once you do go from point A to point B. And you can also tap on the screen to focus. And I could do that while the camera was in motion. That's ultimately what I did do. So it just simplified that whole thing. And the image quality was good enough. We didn't need a raw image out of that to do what we're going to do. And resolution-wise, I had options in terms of shooting 8K, shooting 6K Super 35, shooting 4K, which is ultimately what we did. We shot 4K at XFAVC. We were lighting, we were doing all that kind of stuff, so we could put our exposure where we needed it to be so that none of those things would be a big issue down the road. We would get the quality we need out of the Canon file. So I think that's a situation where the R5C was really doing a job that it excelled at in comparison to some of these other cameras. And on the day of the shoot, we made some adjustments as we were going through things. We did adjust like the speed of the tracking, we adjust the speed of the focus pull. Ultimately went from letting the camera make that focus pull on its own to tapping when we wanted that to happen. And just kind of played with those different parameters as the shoot was going on and was able to dial it in exactly where we wanted it to be. Now on the other side of that, we also needed to do some green screen work as part of this commercial. And that's an occasion where I pulled out the C500 Mark II for a couple of reasons, to play to its strengths. One, we were also doing audio. So C500 Mark II has built-in XLRs, so I could tap directly into that, feed the audio into camera. So we had audio already matched up with our picture. We decided we were going to shoot the 5.9K RAW for the 12-bit color on it to make the key that we were going to pull from the green screen a lot easier. As you know, when you go up in steps from your 8-bit to your 10-bit to your 12-bit, as you increase that, you get more varying levels of color that are available to you, so it makes it a lot easier to pull a green screen key from a 12-bit file than even a 10-bit file, and especially from an 8-bit file. That combined with the resolution of the 6K also makes it easier to pull our key, because the more pixels you have, the more precise it can be in terms of its edges, things like that, and can just make a cleaner key from a higher resolution file. Other benefit is I did not have to undo anything I had going on with my motion control. I could have the C500 Mark II separate, not have to mess and pull the camera off the gimbal of the R5C, rebalance, all that kind of stuff. And again, a situation where the C500 Mark II was a better choice than, say, the Komodo for what we were doing for that. Although the Komodo also would have done a nice job. I could have routed into the Komodo, the audio, etc. Just would have taken a few extra little pieces and GAC and stuff to do that. So this became an all Canon production in terms of small camera doing what it is best at, and a large camera doing kind of what it was best at. And both of those cameras performed flawlessly, and the files looked great, and the shoot turned out a really good success. We were able to get all the shots in that we needed to within the time that we needed to, and the cameras really just performed extremely well. Despite the simplicity of what we were trying to do, there's still a lot of moving parts in this. We had a one-man kind of grip and electric team. It was in a studio. We had client on set. We had agency on set, a couple of agency people, and really just kind of all worked together to get all of our stuff accomplished in the day that we had. And we had one full day. It was a 10-hour day. I think we ended up wrapping about an hour early, actually. And then some of that early time was made up of just me and our gaffer coming in and setting things up ahead of time before the client came in. So just a fun, well-executed day where we were kind of able to use all of the different tools that we had at our disposal to pull off a fun shot that is going to be exciting to post for the client. I really just kind of wanted to talk about this as an example of Canon cinema cameras out in the wild, on production, doing these types of jobs. I don't see too much of this content out there really, on the interwebs, on the YouTubes. This is just what I have. This is what I use for work. Anything that you have is perfectly fine as well, and this could have been accomplished with a lot of different camera systems, but in this case it was the Canon stuff that I own. So any questions for me, any more specifics, leave them down in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer those, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.